Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe that serving this country should never come with an expiration date, hit like and subscribe. Because what happened to the man you're about to meet should never happen to anyone who's ever worn the uniform. His name was Robert Keene, Bobby, to those who knew him well. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. He wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't there to show off medals or talk about wars long past. All he wanted was to withdraw a few $100s from an old bank account he hadn't touched in years. An account where, decades ago, he had deposited hazard pay from missions the government still won't fully acknowledge. He walked into Summit Ridge National Bank like any other customer, calm and steady, hat in hand. That hat, a black cap, embroidered with gold thread, read Korea-Vietnam Veteran. He had cleaned it carefully before leaving home. His shirt was pressed, though the cuffs were fraying, and in his coat pocket were a Veterans Affairs card, two worn, discharge papers, and a brass challenge coin dulled at the edges by time. He stood in line, patiently, quietly, like men from his generation often do, still believing in the importance of waiting your turn. But everything changed the moment he stepped up to the counter. The teller, maybe in her mid-20s, glanced at the account name and hesitated, raising an eyebrow. Bobby handed over his ID, his hands trembling, not from fear or weakness, but from age and the toll of too many cold nights in places no one remembers. "I'm just trying to pull some funds," he said politely. "Name's Robert Keene. It's been a while," she typed, paused. Something didn't line up on her screen. She called over her manager. His name was Caden, slick haircut, short tie, and the kind of smirk that insulted without saying a word. He scanned Bobby's paperwork, then looked him up and down. "You sure this account is yours, sir?" he asked, dragging out "sir" like it was a punchline. "This discharge paper looks like it was typed on a dinosaur." The teller gave a nervous laugh. Bobby didn't respond. He simply reached into his coat and placed a brass challenge coin on the counter. Carefully, respectfully. It was engraved with a thunderbird and 7 stars, something most civilians wouldn't recognize. But any real soldier would. Caden didn't even glance at it. "Cute trinket," he muttered. "You can buy those online." Then he waved over security. "We've got another wannabe vet trying to game the system. Escort him out." The security guard hesitated, just a moment, but it was enough. Bobby had heard every word. So had he. Everyone else in the bank. Some chuckled behind their phones. Others looked away. Bobby didn't argue. He didn't protest. He picked up the coin, slipped it back into his pocket, nodded once, and walked slowly to a bench by the window. There he sat, upright, hands folded, eyes distant. The laughter faded. The room grew still, not guilty, not yet, but uneasy. Like people weren't quite sure anymore. One person wasn't laughing. Her name was Maya Rodriguez. Early 30s, former Air Force logistics specialist, now in defense contracting. She'd seen a coin like that once before, when a retired Joint Special Operations Command colonel placed it on a table during a classified briefing. Everyone in the room had stood without a word. She walked up to the counter, met Caden's eyes, and said, "You just made a mistake." "Excuse me?" Caden blinked. She nodded toward the bench. "That man is no fake. That coin outranks every paycheck in this building," Caden snorted. "If he's that important, why's he alone?" Maya didn't respond. She stepped outside and made a call, but someone else had already recognized the name. In the back office, an older employee, a quiet veteran of the bank himself, had overheard the name Robert Keene. He stood up slowly and walked to a brass plaque on the wall. It had hung there since the bank first opened, dedicated to the Summit Ridge Command Base and the people who helped build it. Among the engraved names was one that hadn't faded, R.J. Keane, the very man who once oversaw the original military infrastructure on this land, long before it was ever converted to civilian use. And now, decades later, being accused of faking a service record inside the bank that stood because of his command. The senior bank employee didn't speak. He just picked up the phone, dialed a number that only a handful of people still knew by heart, and spoke 6 simple words. "It's Bishop Coyne. Summit Ridge. He's here." Then he hung up. Outside, Bobby Keane remained still, unmoving, unbothered. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't demand justice. He simply watched the flag across the street shift in the wind and waited. Not for recognition, not for praise, just waited. Because that's what men like him do. They wait, even when they're forgotten. Even when the world laughs. But what no one inside that bank knew, not Caden, not the teller, not even Maya, was that in just 30 minutes, the laughter would die. Because down the road, in a command office not far from Fort Brixton, a furious general had just slammed his phone onto a desk, thrown on his dress uniform, and was already in motion. The man everyone had dismissed was about to be remembered, permanently. The next 20 minutes inside Summit Ridge National Bank were slow, molasses slow, and thick with discomfort. The atmosphere shifted like fog rolling in. The teller who had giggled earlier now kept her eyes down, pretending to type. Caden paced behind the counter, glancing repeatedly toward the front doors, not knowing why he felt uneasy, only that he did. Bobby hadn't moved. He sat as instructed, like it was just another VA waiting room. His cane resting between his hands, posture upright, dignity intact, even if no one in the room saw it. That challenge coin, still tucked away, carried more weight than anyone realized. But the silence in the lobby was different now. No longer one of mockery. Now it felt uncertain, uneasy. As if the doubt had crept in. Maya Rodriguez stood off to the side, arms crossed, jaw tight. She'd made her call to a retired colonel at Fort Brixton. The moment she said Bishop Coyne, Robert Keane, his voice changed. "You say he's there now. Don't let him leave." She didn't know what would happen next, but she could feel something was coming. And she was right. 2 blocks away, a black SUV sliced through traffic, lights flashing once, a silent command of authority. Inside sat Major General Everett Caney, highly decorated, respected, feared. Head of regional ops for 4 military districts, and one of only 5 men in the country authorized to carry bishop-level active recon clearance. The moment he got the call, he stood up mid-briefing and spoke 4 words to his aide. "Suit up, we're leaving." Because Robert Keane wasn't just some name in a database to Caney. He was the reason Caney ever made it past captain. A legend. A ghost. A mentor whose fingerprints were still etched into military doctrine. And now, someone had humiliated him in uniform, in Publix, in a building built on the legacy he helped establish. It lit a fire inside General Kane that few had ever seen. Back inside the bank, Bobby adjusted the sleeve of his worn coat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A customer near the coffee station quietly slipped out, no longer interested in his deposit. The security guard near the door shifted awkwardly, unsure why the room felt heavy. Still, Bobby made no scene. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even looked angry. Yet somehow, he carried a gravity that rattled those used to being in charge. Caden tried to shake off the growing tension. "He's still here," he muttered, peeking past the teller. "Counter." Then louder, to a new employee, probably hoping this goes viral so he can get a pity donation or something. Veterans do that crap all the time. Maya's jaw clenched. Even the teller winced. Caden leaned back smugly. I should have called the cops. Betty causes a scene any minute. And that's when the glass doors flew open. Not a breeze. Not a customer. A command. Boots hit the floor with precision. Deliberate. Heavy. Every step like punctuation. In walked Major General Everett Caney, full dress uniform, rows of ribbons gleaming, coat lines sharp enough to cut. He didn't need to speak to own the room. He was the room. Behind him, his aide followed silently, carrying a single briefcase. No one said a word. No one dared. The noise died instantly. Phones were hung up mid-ring. Coffee cups were left mid-pour. Conversation stopped like a needle ripping off vinyl. Caden, still leaning smugly on the counter, looked up and froze. His smirk vanished. General Kane didn't acknowledge anyone. He didn't need to. His eyes locked immediately on the bench, by the window, where Bobby Keene still sat. And then, in front of the entire bank, the general snapped to attention and saluted. The sound of that salute, the crack of palm to temple, rang out louder than any apology ever could. Bobby looked up, confused for just a moment before slowly rising. He returned the salute, not with pride, but with dignity. The kind of dignity born from decades of service. The kind of dignity you don't need to talk about, because it walks in before you do. He hadn't been saluted in years, but he never forgot how. General Caney turned slowly, scanning the room like a blade being drawn from a sheath. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low, but sharp enough to slice through the air like glass. Who here called Colonel Robert Keene a fraud? The room held its breath. No one answered. Caney stepped forward, deliberate and composed. Colonel Keene, he said again, emphasizing the rank with military precision, was instrumental in establishing joint force recon protocols still used. In free nations today, his record spans 2 wars, 6 theaters, and 14 unacknowledged operations. You questioned his identity. All eyes turned to Caden. He looked pale. Sweat formed at his temples. His voice cracked. I didn't know. His documents were old. Of course they're old, Caney snapped, because he has earned his age. He was serving this country while your biggest challenge was learning how to schedule tweets. The silence shifted again, this time from discomfort to shame. Caney's aide stepped forward and opened the briefcase. Inside, a thick folder stamped "Classified." A commemorative coin set in velvet. A printed scan of the bank's own wall showing a dedication plaque, with Robert Keene's name etched in bold. Caney placed the folder on the counter. This bank exists because of his strategic design. That account you flagged as suspicious? It funded the original supply lines your institution now profits from. Then Caney turned back to Bobby. His tone softened. Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in town sooner. Bobby nodded tiredly. Didn't come to be found. Just needed enough to help my grandson with school. Caney returned the nod, resolute. Then let's make that happen. And together they stepped toward the counter. Caden backed away, hands raised, eyes wide, his confidence gone, along with the laughter that had filled the bank just an hour earlier. The silence inside Summit Ridge National Bank wasn't awkward anymore. It was reverent. Something had shifted. The ground remembered the weight it once held. Bobby withdrew the funds quietly. No scene, no speech, just enough for tuition. He hadn't even mentioned the reason until Caney asked, because he never wanted recognition. He never needed it. He just wanted to keep his promise. To those he fought for, and to the family he came home to. The teller's hands shook as she printed the receipt. She whispered an apology. Bobby didn't acknowledge it. Not out of spite. He just didn't need it. He folded the slip once, tucked it in his pocket and turned to leave. But Caney stopped him. A gentle hand on his shoulder. "Colonel, you've got 5 minutes." Bobby raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Caney nodded toward the lobby. "For the honor you never asked for." And then, without command, without cue, every military veteran in the room stood and saluted. A young reservist, by the ATM, an old Navy corpsman at the deposit table. Even civilians stood, not because they had to, but because something told them. This is how you honor a man like that. Bobby froze, not in pride, in disbelief. Then he returned the salute. Slow, precise, absolute. Caney reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. "We've been holding this for years," he said quietly. "Thought you'd want it now." Inside was a medal, clean, polished, engraved with 3 simple words: "Duty beyond record." Bobby stared at it for a long time. No speech, no tears, just a slow nod. Like a door had finally closed. One no one else even knew had been left open. "I didn't come here to be honored," Bobby said. "I came to keep a promise." Caney nodded. "And in doing so, you reminded us what sacrifice really means." Bobby walked out into the sunlight. No cameras followed. No headlines came. But every person inside that bank stood a little taller afterward, spoke a little gentler, remembered a little deeper. Later that week, someone quietly etched a new line beneath. The memorial by the bank's front entrance. Robert J. Keene, Colonel, United States Army Honor, and silence. No mention of the incident. No mention of the general. But everyone who worked there knew. Because some truths don't need to be shouted to change everything.